know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
That from yesterday, the President of the United States addressing the nation over his Twitter page. Good Thursday morning. I'm Tyler Keefe in the studios of 89.3 WBLD, Orchard Lake, West Bloomfield, Keagle Harbor, Sylvan Lake. This is the Oakland County Megacast on Civic Center TV, on 89.3 Lakes FM, on 88.1 FM The Biff, and on Birmingham Area Municipal Access. We will be joining later on the Facebook page of the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. For now, we are broadcasting live on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Civic Center TV 15. We want to bring in, of course, as always, from her home studio, Ronnie Dahl.
Boy, what a last 24 hours this has been. January 6, 2021 is going to go down in history. People around the world watched in horror as well as disbelief as pro-Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, breaking windows, gaining access inside, desecrating the people's house. And while the Capitol was under siege, President Donald Trump released a brief video asking rioters to remain peaceful, but also praising his supporters. That video has since been taken down by Twitter. But in the wake of the aftermath, 4 people have died, including one supporter who was shot by law enforcement. 14 police officers have been injured and 52 people arrested. However, that number is expected to grow in the coming days, weeks, as well as months. The attack on democracy disrupted the electoral college that was underway, the count that was underway, but it did not stop the proceedings, only delaying it. And early this morning, elected leaders did finalize that President-elect Joe Biden did, in fact, win the presidency. And that is exactly what some of these rioters and what people are saying or calling them domestic terrorists were trying to stop. And while calm returned to the nation's capital here closer to home, this morning, Michigan State Capitol was closed due to an unspecified threat. We are going to go ahead and jump into the show if we can. And joining us now on the Oakland County Megacast is going to be State Senator Rosemary Bayer with the 12th District. Thank you for being with us here on the Megacast.
Thank you for having me.
As someone who is an elected leader, what was going through your mind when you watched the video and that live feed that was coming out of our nation's capital?
It was horrific, like any citizen, right? Like everyone else in this country, watching the insurrection, watching people literally attacking our government. This is our government. This is our democracy, and they attacked us. I went from fury to crying and back and forth. It was just horrific.
I heard someone say, how can you love America, which so many of these protesters and rioters claim to do, but yet attack our democracy at the same time?
It's hard to imagine how someone can get there. It's happened in history where people have aligned themselves with autocratic dictatorish leaders and done things that were simply horrifying. And that's what I see going on. This is what's defined as sedition or treason, where you attack your own government, right?
So can we talk a little bit, what is actually going on in Lansing right now? Has the Capitol been given the all clear?
Yeah, I think we just got the all clear just a few minutes ago. Yeah, but I would say that we're all pretty darn on edge right now. And I know I sent the message to my staff. We don't have session today, thankfully. I just said, stay away, stay home, don't go anywhere near the city, don't go near the Capitol. Our offices are right across the street from the Capitol. So it's, in fact, I was followed out of my office once by a person carrying a very large rifle as I walked to my car. So I just told him to stay home.
It's like, where do we start? Where do we go from here? But because I will say, as someone who had worked with a law enforcement agency as well, even though I was in the citizen capacity, I was surprised that they were able to pull this off. But on top of that, we've gone through similar situations here in the state of Michigan where they did not storm our state capitol. However, there have been numerous rallies and protests
They almost
with long
did.
guns.
They almost did storm it in the sense that that day that they had the biggest rally last summer, they came into the Capitol in such numbers that no one could actually move. We couldn't hear ourselves think because the noise was so high. They let them up into the balcony. And this was the pictures that some people saw with them standing there with AR-15s in the balcony where we were below. It felt like we were in a fishbowl. And it turned out later that those were the very people who had created the plot to do two things. One, come in and shoot us, and two, go and kidnap the governor and drop her in the middle of the lake. So they were practicing. That day was a practice for the day they came back and actually shot the guns. So.
And so when you saw this yesterday, were you thinking this could happen where I work every day as well? Or because I feel like they should have learned from what was going on in Michigan.
I would think they should have learned what goes on in Michigan. And this one, it's true. And in one sense, we're not accustomed to terrorists from within our own country attacking our own government, right? We're not accustomed to that. This is not the Middle East. This is the United States. We don't do this kind of thing, right? So on the one hand, there's that. On the other hand, this has happened in Michigan, and it wasn't that long ago, and we certainly should have learned in this circumstance, even in the morning, as the rally was happening at the White House, and he was literally telling them to go to the Capitol and fight. They didn't still call people and bolster their force right then on the spot. I mean, they must have had people over there listening to those speeches and to that rally. So it's disappointing or it's suspicious. The other part is what a double standard we have, right? All of those white terrorists led into the Capitol with very large guns, no stopping any of them. If they were not white, there is no way this would have gone the same way it did, right? Yeah.
And that really is a kind of a conversation that is going to be fleshed out in the coming days. But we do know that people have been shot. The one lady who was shot, she was actually a veteran, and she died. And granted, she was doing something she shouldn't have been doing, but she believed in the cause and believed in this movement per se. Do you think that the president incited this and there should be criminal charges?
I do. There are multiple reports of the rally and what he told those people to do. When he said to go to the Capitol and fight, that is the definition of sedition. And betraying your government is actually treason, right? So those two things, those charges, he should not only be taken out of the presidency immediately, he should be locked up and held accountable to those charges. And the people that did it are treason. I mean, that's,
And you just mentioned there, he should be taken out of office. So there is conversation right now about trying to invoke the 25th Amendment. There are other lawmakers that are trying to say, let's impeach him. We're talking about 13 days.
I know. Impeachment is not going to help.
Exactly. Impeachment is too long of a process. It's not going to get the job done. So is the 25th Amendment a viable pathway right now?
When you look at what he did in one day, and there's still, 13 more days to go? Yeah, I absolutely think we need to take action when that is what we should do.
So with someone who is an elected leader, you are a Democrat as well. How safe do you feel right now?
Not terribly, to be honest. And you know, the numbers of people that called yesterday, that called and wrote, and are you safe? You know, it's like, I'm not in Washington. I know, but still, are you safe? You know, no, I don't. And we have already had a lot of conversation within our caucus in the Senate talking about when we go back to work, right? I actually think we need to have stronger protections than the sergeants. We have a group of Capitol sergeants who are wonderful, but just like the ones who are in the US Capitol, they do not have the capacity to stand up to what happened or what even could have happened last summer when they were there, the rioters, the protesters, sorry. The other thing we need is some other additional, like no visitor policy until this stuff blows over. Maybe the National Guard, you know, some way they're talking. We actually, many of us, I have a bulletproof vest. A lot of us do now since last summer. But when you look at the pictures of those guys, they were standing above us. And I keep saying, where do I get a helmet? You know, I need a bulletproof helmet. I don't trust that this is going to be adequate. I really don't feel safe. I'm not the only one.
And so with that, how does that impact the job that you're doing?
Well, it adds a level of emotion and fury to everything. And so actually, you know, it's interesting personally, starting a new session, right? This is our 101st legislative session. It's an important thing. It's an important date for us. So we've talked about what should our first legislation that we introduce be, you know, how do we present ourselves to the people as that we work for as we start this new session. And I'm so focused on education. I'm so focused on the environment, thinking about water justice. Maybe we should do something like that as our first bill. Now I think it's going to be the guns in the Capitol bill that we introduced last session. We have to reintroduce that. We'll do that again. Senator Pohanke and I have 2 bills for that package. We're going to introduce that right away and push really hard. We've never been able to get them to have a hearing on any kind of gun violence bills, let alone those. So they're going to get a lot more pressure this time.
But do you think, just like we saw yesterday with on the nation's capital, where some of the people that are our elected leaders that weren't for certifying the electoral vote switched their vote because they're seeing the direct attack on democracy? That's what a lot of people are saying this was. So do you think now that the rhetoric is going to change and the mindset's going to change even here in Lansing in the state of Michigan to help you get some of these bills and these measures
hope
passed?
So that's our goal, right? We really just want to get things done. Most of us, people like me especially, I went there, I'm an engineer and fixed stuff, right? I didn't get there to do this. And what's interesting, there were 11 Republicans in the Senate who signed a letter, I don't know if you saw that, encouraging Congress to oppose the certification of the electoral vote, right? 11 of them, which I found highly offensive and highly incorrect, right? This is the will of the people. This is how people voted, and they're still doing this. They're still maintaining this line. Well, already one of them has issued a statement, I think it was in the Free Press, saying, you know, I disavow any of this. This kind of violence is, they were attacking our democracy. They're saying a lot of the right words today, but they were also out there coordinating, what's the word, with the protesters in our lawn with their guns and actually up in the balcony talking with them, the same people, the same senators. I mean, they are part of that community. They're part of the people that lied continuously about the election and driving the fury amongst that group of protesters around the elections, telling people that it was false, telling people that there was cheating when lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit said no fraud, no cheating, state after state, court after court, all the way up to the Supreme Court. There is no evidence, and yet they continue to say, just like the president, that there was fraud and that we need to fight back against this. The election was stolen. It's flat out not true. And our senators knew that and continued to incite this kind of protesting and rioting.
So in knowing that, a couple of questions for you, because as you mentioned, you're also an engineer, you're an IT person, you're about fixing the problems. Do you think there is parts of our election process that is broken that does need to be further explored, so that there are issues that can be fixed.
Yeah, I wrote down 3 specific things, and we actually, as we were planning our year, 3 specific things that we should fix as soon as possible, so we don't run into, timelines and stuff when elections start up. One of them is to give more support to the clerks and allow them to process absentee ballots earlier. I mean, that was part of the issue that day, right? And the president kept saying, well, I was winning. And then all of a sudden I was losing. Clearly you're cheating. Well, the fact is those ballots had been in for a long time. If we could have processed them earlier, then there wouldn't have been this long lag to getting those ballots up and in the count, right? So you wouldn't see this imbalance at the end of the night. So we should fix that. We should fix the other ways that make it simpler for people to vote. I have a lot of seniors. We have Pontiac is in the center of my community, and I adore Pontiac and I adore the senior communities. And a lot of them are accustomed to getting help voting. They get rides to the polls on buses. They get all that stuff was taken away. We actually set up with Pontiac. The clerk was wonderful there. He took a mobile polling station for the whole week before the election and did absentee ballot, or allowed, collected their ballots, gave them ballots, let them vote on site for senior locations, senior housing, the homeless shelters around the Pontiac, and just really tried to reach out to people who normally get more support. So we need to fix that. The ballot boxes, make sure there's no non-official ballot collection boxes or drop boxes, right? So things like that we need to fix. Those are the places that we saw things that didn't work right. The other part of it was the election itself, the most votes ever in the history of this country. And no errors, no fraud, everything is amazing how well it went. And the fact that we could count that many votes within a few days is incredible. So a little bit of extra support for the teams, for the clerks and the people that work at the different polling locations. That's all we really need to do. We're doing a great job. We already protect really, really, really well.
For those just joining us here on the Oakland County Megacast, we are speaking with State Senator Rosemary Bayer of the 12th District. And with that, you touched on some of your other fellow elected leaders and on the Republican side. How do you think this is going to change the dynamics of working together going forward in 2021?
Well, I would say that my hope is that, they will take this more seriously. I think a lot of the people that were trying to, incite more of this kind of protesting and the continuation of something that they knew very well was not true. Literally lying to keep people riled up, right? I think that what happened yesterday has got to have an impact on how they feel about their own behavior, whether they ever say it out loud or not, that they went too far, that this is our democracy, this is for our people, and we cannot take it apart. So I think I hope it will get better. And we'll settle into something that is more reasonable, more like it. We always will have our differences, but we used to be able to talk. Let's do that again.
But I have to, before we let you go, if I can go ahead and ask you the question. Obviously, there was a recent issue between you and members of your staff and the FBI.
Okay.
Has it changed, or what are your feelings? Can you, for those not familiar with the topic, tell us what you went through?
Okay. Yes, so we use Zoom often for our staff meetings. We don't have any in-person staff meetings anymore. Those are very confidential meetings, but we have to do them online. We had one day, 10 days after a specific staff meeting, my chief of staff was woken up with the FBI pounding on her door. And as they talked to her, it turned out they had heard of a conversation on a specific day at a specific time, which was that staff meeting, where she was talking about tear gas and elections. So as that was true in that staff meeting, I have a bill that I've drafted about prohibiting tear gas for police use. And we talked about that bill in that meeting. We talked about all the bills that we have not introduced yet. We kind of run through them every meeting toward the end of the year to figure out, is this the right time? So we would be talking about, should we introduce that tear gas bill, or should we drop the tear gas bill before the election or wait till after? So in the whole context of a legislation, of course, that makes perfectly good sense. The person who overheard that or was told about that conversation in our meeting didn't know legislative work, didn't understand that. It reported to the FBI that there's this terrorist thing going on and they're going to drop tear gas at an election, at the election. So the FBI goes and pounds on Katie's door. So the problem is they waited 10 days to do that. First of all, she was highly terrified, actually. I was going to say intimidated, but terrified is a better word. When you have pounding on your door, and they were aggressively questioning her for about 10 minutes about this tear gas thing and what does that mean and where is it and why. And she's telling me this probably right after they left. And I said, why didn't they know who you were? They had 10 days to learn who she was. And they could have seen. The first thing you find when you search her name in Google is that she's my chief of staff. So they took 10 days. They didn't uncover that particular fact. And I asked the FBI about that, particularly on 10 days. Why did you wait till right before the election if you were worried about a tear gas attack of some sort? Well, we didn't really think it was that credible. I said, okay, so it wasn't that credible. Why didn't you just call me then? Why would you terrify someone who is still frightened? And my whole staff, every single time we talk now, we worry about what we say and who's going to hear it and who's going to misinterpret that. It was just really poorly done in every way, which, some people have said, is that what happened at the Capitol? Are they just, not doing a good job? I think they were definitely overloaded in work there before the election, but still, if you think it's not credible, call me. Ask what happened.
So when I read this article and I first saw it, I had so many questions, but I do want to know, because it's the same thing in some of the issues that you raised as well, as how did they get this information, which makes me to wonder, is someone in your team, is there a wiretap that's going on? Is there an investigation outside?
I'm IT, right? So my first assumption was, oh my God, they are listening in, right? They're trapping. There's a term called data mining, if you've heard of that, big data. So the telecoms collect all this huge data on everything that goes on. They can mine that data and look for keywords like drop, tear gas, and election within one small span of time, and that could raise a flag, right? It's illegal for them to do that and to come to Katie's house and ask about it. But I thought that was a good chance that was what happened. But all right from the start, Katie said, there was a repairman in my house. I don't think he could have heard me. He was in another part of the house. The door was closed. So in the end, the FBI did tell us that it was a person who made a report. So he said repeatedly to me, because I had engaged some of my former colleagues because I worked in identity management. He said, I will tell you, it had nothing to do with electronic surveillance. We did not use electronic surveillance in this case. So we're going with that. We're going with, okay, you waited 10 days then to, for something that you thought was so important, you had to pound on somebody's door at 7:30 in the morning, right? Why did you wait till right before the election if it was such a big deal? And if not, why didn't you just call me? So in the end, he did agree to look at their alternatives for how to handle things like this. And we're going to talk again. So maybe we will get a chance to make their behavior better. But I know it was driving me crazy. And I don't know how you make people recover from that. How do you get over this thing that happens? Katie told me yesterday she had a niece staying at her house. And she told her, don't answer the door. Turn on the alarm. Just stay back there where nobody can see you. I mean, what a thing to have to think about that, Not good, not fair.
It's not good. It really isn't. With that, State Senator Rosemary Bayer, we always appreciate your time, and we appreciate your time as well. And I know that these are tense times, and it really is a sad time for our democracy when we're thinking that our elected leaders need to wear a bulletproof vest, or even to have one. But I will say, as a journalist, I had one. My husband provided it to me. And
Did you have a helmet?
And I did not have a helmet, but I will say since I did work for ATF, and so I was their public information officer. So I had access to such equipment, but of course I was a civilian. But it's just really sad that that's what's needed for our elected leaders in today's day and age.
Yeah, it is. I hope it gets better soon. That's what we got to work toward, right? We're going to fix it.
And where do we go from here?
From here, we have talking to do. We have some bridges to heal and build. And we've got to find our way back to where we are working together for the people of this country. That's what we have to do.
And one of the things we do want to point out is just like all of the protests that happened earlier this year across the country with the Black Lives Movement, we need to also understand that there are a lot of protesters out there, a majority of the protesters and the people that attended the rally that were not violent, that were not a part of this, and their message is being lost. And so we need to recognize that as well. And like you said, open up the dialogue, because closing down the dialogue does not help our situation as Americans.
Yeah,
and
I mean, we've
forward.
had multiple parties forever. We've got to learn how to live together again and how to get the work done. I mean, we can't let this stop our country from moving forward and taking the care and doing the right things for the people. We just have to get back to that.
Well, we so appreciate your time here with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Stay safe. I'm glad that you and everyone there in Lansing, they've been given the all clear at the Lansing State, at the Capitol there in Lansing. They have been given the all clear. Everything is safe, but you can imagine some tense moments for members of our elected population. We're going to take a quick break here on the Oakland County Megacast, and when we come back, we're going to be speaking with a member, someone here from Metro Detroit who actually traveled to DC, and he went to the rally. We'll get his perspective when the Oakland County Megacast continues.
Michigan, we still need to stay careful because we don't want to go backwards, back to where we started. So keep standing 6 feet apart, keep wearing a mask in public, and if you have symptoms, talk to a healthcare provider about getting tested. To move forward, let's all do our part. So stay careful. Michigan.gov/coronavirus.
Hi, I'm Dr. Faust, the Medical Director for the Oakland County Health Division. The most important thing you can do to prevent the spread of illness is to wash your hands thoroughly and often. Follow these 6 easy steps every time you wash your hands. Step 1, turn on the sink and wet your hands with warm water. Step 2, apply soap to your hands and lather between your fingers, under your nails, and the front and back of your hands and wrists. Step 3, wash your hands by scrubbing them together for at least 20 seconds. Step 4, rinse your hands with warm, clean water. And step 5, dry your hands with a clean cloth towel, a paper towel, or hot air blow dryer. If you're using a cloth towel, make sure to change it often. For handheld faucets, turn off the water using a paper towel instead of your bare hand. Step 6, if you're using a paper towel, throw it away. Practice healthy habits like washing your hands after coughing or sneezing into them to keep you and others healthy. Go to oakgov.com/health or call Nurse on Call at 1-800-848-5533 to learn more.
We want to say thank you for joining us here on the Oakland County Megacast on this January 7th. Of course, January 6th is going to go down as a day in history after the siege on our nation's capital. But for so many of the people that went to DC yesterday, they were not there for the siege. They were there as a peaceful protest and to be a part of what they thought was going to be a history-making day. Joining us now on the phone is Sean Crum. He is from Detroit, and he actually went to DC along with others from the Metro Detroit area. Sean, thank you for being with us on the Megacast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sean, we talked a little bit earlier. Give us a little bit of your background. You went to D.C. yesterday for what?
Well, we went down there just to show support for President Trump. Obviously, my wife and I are Trump supporters. We believe he's done a pretty good job for this country and us. And we wanted to get with like-minded people and do some talking and introduce ourselves and meet new people and just go down there to show support.
How was your experience?
It was good. Overall, it was really good. It was a sea of people. Everybody was happy. There was we didn't hear anything on the ground about any of this going down. Everything was peaceful. We listened to a lot of speeches. Just we're having a good time hanging out in D.C. Didn't really see it becoming any type of problem.
So were you able to listen to the president's speech at all?
Yes, and actually,
or at least his at the rally. So let's talk at the rally, not what he recorded later.
Yes, and that's actually when my wife and I started getting out of the crowd and walking down, toward the Capitol building, just to check things out. We knew that's where everybody was going to be marching afterwards, and we kind of wanted to avoid the massive amount of people. So we were, when President Trump started speaking, we kind of turned it on our phones and were listening as we were walking through town. And
so it's kind of like going to a huge concert where you can't get up close, so you look for the technology to give you that one-on-one connection, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of people are feeling as if Trump incited these riots through the speech. What did you take away from it?
I don't agree with that. I don't think he incited any type of violence. I don't think he called for any type of violence. I think that 99% of the people there were good people and big supporters of the president and our country. And there were a few there that got thrown into the mix that did this. And in my opinion, they did it to make us all look bad. And we were not down there for violence. We were not down there to cause any harm. We were down there to support our country. And the people that support our president that didn't make it to D.C., we were down there to support them as well.
With that, I look at this, and you and I talked before, I've been caught up in a riot, and it's overwhelming. But I also feel at the end of the day, it takes away from the message that you went there to support. Do you have those same feelings?
Absolutely. Now, when we got back to the hotel, we're staying on the other side of the bridge in Virginia, and me and my wife were talking the whole time, and it really opened up a wound on what was supposed to be a great day and really damaged it. And it's just incredible how it can go from peaceful and everything is fine to complete chaos within minutes. And we were down there, we were carrying medical supplies, body armor. I mean, we were prepared for the worst, but didn't really think anything that crazy was going to happen. And I can't speak for everybody, but in my opinion, it definitely did bruise what we were down there to do.
So I have one question for you. Why would you go with body armor? Because I will say my husband bought me a bulletproof vest when I was reporting on the streets of Detroit. It's not cheap. The vest was $600. So we were like, it's not cheap. I'm like, could I have that $600 for new curtains? When I found out how much he paid for it, so I'm like, why would you even go with that? Because some people are going to say, well, you went there, and if you're bringing that, you were looking for trouble.
No, I wouldn't think of it that way. I'm a big Second Amendment guy. Everybody that knows me knows that. And I follow the law as far as carrying firearms. And D.C.'s laws, obviously, if anybody knows, unless you have a permit for D.C., you cannot carry a firearm. So for the people that were carrying, I was just being prepared for the worst. I would rather have my equipment on and not have to use it than not have it and take a bullet to the chest, And you saw, I mean, everybody saw what ended up happening yesterday. And, you know, with that poor woman who did end up getting shot and died, you know, anything was possible. You know, after so far, who knows what desperate people will do. And I would rather be able to get my wife back home safely and myself than end up in a hospital somewhere over something that could have been prevented.
Yeah, because you're wondering, had she had a vest on, would she still be alive right now? And she was a veteran. She served our nation for 14 years, I believe.
Absolutely, and it's so sad. That should have never happened. I honestly don't know how or why it happened. I couldn't see that woman being a serious threat, but I wasn't inside that building. I don't know the details.
But Sean, with that, when you look at this and you hear these stories, it seems like there are people that were so dedicated to President Trump that they would go to these extremes. Where do you and others such as yourself go from here? Do you feel defeated, or do you still have hope in our democracy?
You know, I can't say that I feel defeated. I do have hope. But I just can't see our country coming together with it being as divided as it is right now. And especially with Joe Biden. And this is just my opinion. I can't speak for everybody. But I don't think the man is a good fit to hold office. I mean, he can't complete sentences. He was clearly on video bribing the Ukrainian government, and the exact thing that our country tried to impeach President Trump for. That was a total hoax. And nobody's talking about that. And how do we trust this man to do what's best for the country and not what's best for the politicians? So I think that a lot of people share my beliefs. Like I said, I can't speak for everybody, but I don't think our country is going to heal for quite some time.
That is really, it really is sad to think about. But they are now talking about trying to invoke the 25th Amendment. President Donald Trump only has 13 days left in office. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, they've disengaged his account.
Yes, which is
What are your
un-American.
thoughts?
It's censorship.
Yeah, it's censorship, and there are a lot of arguments to censorship, by the way, because as someone who is a member of the media, we may not like what one side says, but what happens when that crosses into your world as well. So there is something with censorship in that regard. But with that, what are your thoughts on the future?
You know, it's really uncertain. All I can say is that, you know, we're law-abiding citizens. We're going to keep pressing forward and doing the best we can to support our families and this country. And I honestly can say 100% that I will never support Joe Biden as our president. I have a lot of questions with the election. I have a lot of discrepancies with the election. But that, like I said, that's just me and, you know, my wife as well. But we are just going to keep doing what we have to do as American citizens and press forward and make the best for our families. We have to worry about each other. I have never sat back and thought, man, these politicians are really here for us. They're really going to help us out. I've never relied on them. I've never relied on any form of government to help us or do right by us. We have to do right by each other. And going forward, I think that that's the only route to go to kind of heal these wounds and make things better for the rest of the country. If we keep fighting and fighting, it's just going to get worse and worse, and, you know, nothing's going to change.
And that really is a message for both sides of the aisle
Right.
as well. So if they do manage to invoke the 25th Amendment and Pence becomes the president for the remainder of the 13 days, 12 days, 11 days, whatever is left, will you support him?
Honestly, with what he did during the certification process, that kind of stung. So I honestly can't say that I would support him. I wouldn't be out in the streets protesting and screaming, I'm going to go to work like everyone else, and I'm going to pay my bills like everyone else. It's 13 days. I don't know what he could really accomplish in that 13 days that would do further damage to our country or even attempt to help our country. So it's kind of a moot point to me as far as what they do with that. I think it's a political game. I don't really see it as anything that's going to help or hurt us. I think it's kind of just a dead thing that they're going to try to do.
Sean Crum with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. He attended the rally yesterday in DC, but we want to make it clear you were not a part of the siege on the Capitol. With that, Sean, I just have to wonder what do you think this has done long term for people such as yourself and the supporters of not just Trump, but what he stood for? Because a lot of people, when you say you're a Trump supporter, they also say you're a racist. Do you feel you're a racist because you live in the city of Detroit?
Yeah, I've got quite a few black friends and friends of color, and we're not racist. We did get heckled on our walk out of there. Me and my wife, we got screamed at for being Trump supporters, and I can't say that, just because you're a Trump supporter, they lump you into one group. And I support our country. I support our Constitution, as well as my wife. And I think a lot of people have lost sight of that. I think a lot of the left has lost sight of that. As a matter of fact, all of the left has lost sight of that. And, we just got to keep pressing forward. We got to keep moving. We can't sit around sulking about this. It is what it is, and we've got to deal with it. And, hopefully things get better. I honestly don't see that happening for quite some time. The country is severely divided.
But what do you think would take to bridge that divide? Does it start with a conversation and trying to come together? Is there a compromise in your eyes?
I've always thought, these same people that have been in office for 20, 30, 40 years have gotten us to this point. I think that's where we need to start making changes. Term limits, things of that nature. Get some fresh faces in office. Get some new people in office that'll actually listen to the wants and needs of the American people rather than lobbyists and things like that. Help this country rather than help yourself. I just don't know how else we can do that with the same people sitting in the same positions.
But there is also the argument that, like any job, it takes you a while to learn the job and get the connections to be able to make improvements and get things done. So if you limit term limits, are we also limiting progress?
I don't know. We've never tried it. So, what do we have to lose at this point? I think new ideas need to be introduced rather than shut down as soon as they're brought up. It shouldn't have to be, okay, I work in government, but I need to be buddies with this guy in order to get something done. You should be able to do your job, and people agree on certain things and make changes that way rather than political payoffs or whatever the case may be. This is our government that's supposed to work for the people, and I don't feel they've worked for the people in quite some time. And I'm only 36. I can't, I've lived a short life so far. But what I've seen in my life up until this point, this has been the first president that's ever actually tried to accomplish what he swore he would do when running for president. I've never seen anybody else do that.
So, Sean, knowing that we've been through his entire presidency, but also just within the last 24 hours, if he were to run for re-election in 2024, would you support him?
Absolutely, without a doubt. In my opinion, I think by 2024, he's getting up there in age. I don't think he's going to want to do that, but you never know. And for what he's done for me and my family during his term, I couldn't be happier. I have no qualms with him. The one thing I can say, there are times where he should not be on the internet and, you know, getting on Twitter and saying stuff. Sometimes you should keep your mouth shut, but, you know, he's an imperfect human being just like the rest of us, so I can't say that, you know, everything was terrible. I thought that he did a great job. I've paid less taxes. My wife has paid less taxes. We've made more money steadily every year since he's been in office, and things were good. And I think that this pandemic came and they just tried to turn it and blame it all on him and blame all of our country's problems on him when we've had these problems for a long time now.
So take his Twitter account away.
Right.
I mean, there's so many people, even a lot of people that are huge supporters of Trump will say the same thing. Take his Twitter account away. But any lasting words that you want to leave with us? Just for you, what will you take away from being there yesterday? Because we have to remember there were thousands and thousands of people there that were there for the rally, not for what happened on the Capitol.
Yes, I can say 100% that if we had to do it all over again, we absolutely would. I was proud to be there. I'm glad we came. I would absolutely do it again. I stand with Trump supporters. I stand with the American public, 100%. I would never turn my back on this country, and I feel that so many people have. And I think that if something is worth fighting for, you fight for it, and you keep fighting for it no matter what happens. And that's kind of where we're going to go from here. We're just going to, you know, keep going. We're going to keep pushing forward. We're going to keep fighting, and hopefully others realize that this country is worth fighting for, absolutely.
But some people will say you can love America, but you can't hate democracy at the same time. And they felt like that was on display yesterday. Your thoughts on that?
You know, I don't think that, you know, I can't speak for the actions of the idiots that pressed through the doors. That was just a dumb move. But how can we have a democracy when everything seems to me to be 100% one-sided? It's either you join with us or we leave you behind. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with a two-party system either. How can we get anybody else in there when they're not rich, when they don't have money to raise for a campaign? That's something that perhaps needs to change as well. What do the super wealthy know about guys like me that live in Detroit, in the neighborhoods, other people like that work hard and do the best they can for their family? These people don't live in reality, and they're the ones that run our country. How is that helping us at all? And, you know, just for example, they just gave everybody $600 after 9 months. What did that do? You know?
Sean Crum with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. He attended the rally yesterday in the D.C. area in the nation's capital. Sean, anything that maybe I didn't touch on that you want to mention before we let you go?
No, honestly, I think you pretty much got it all. And like I said, it was a great time. We met a lot of great people and had a lot of good conversations. There's a lot of good ideas floating around out there. And, you know, to the American public, just hang on, hang in there. You know, change could be coming sooner than later. Hopefully it's good. But either way, press forward and provide for your family and just keep going.
Hey, Sean, real quick though, before I let you go, when you went there yesterday, was there really any thought in your mind that you or members of the Trump supporters were going to be able to change the outcome of this election?
You know, I can't say that us as supporters were determined that we could change the outcome. We were there to kind of pull politicians' heads out of the sand to at least look into this election further and look at this evidence that's been provided. Because from what I can tell, the courts kind of just tossed it aside. Everybody's just tossed all this evidence aside that I have personally seen, you know, video, articles, all these things that I think really deserve a hard look, and nobody wanted to do that. And I think that was a serious, serious problem. So I don't believe that any of us there thought that we were going to change the election. We were just trying to get the attention of the politicians that had the power to at least get this moving and look into this a little further.
One thing I will say I find fascinating, though, is people forget Trump was a wealthy guy. I mean, he came from a wealthy family. He was handed what we would all say a golden spoon in life. So why are you guys following him?
Well,
what is it about him that makes you feel like he's one of us?
Well, I think that he's a guy that, obviously had money and came from money, and he went into public office and stopped making all that kind of money and stopped, living that kind of lifestyle to serve the public. Most of the time, a politician gets in office and comes out of office super wealthy. He came in super wealthy and donated all of his pay to the country, worked hard for the American people. Most of these politicians go in, and by the time they come out, they are multi-millionaires. How does that work for a public servant? I don't get it.
Well, Sean, I will say it's been great having you with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I know that you were there yesterday, but we do want to let people know that you are not a part of the group that was trying to get into the Capitol, because there is a big difference. There is a big difference between peaceful protesters and the message you wanted to get across, as well as what they're now calling domestic terrorists that did, in fact, go into the Capitol and gain access into the Capitol. So, Sean, thank you. And we also want to say safe travels to you, your wife, and the others that went with you as you travel back to Detroit today.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, we appreciate it. Safe travels. We're going to take a quick break here on the Oakland County Megacast. Still a lot to get to in the second hour of the show.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it.
You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask.
Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
You know we'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local. Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
We want to say thank you for taking time out of your Thursday to join us here on the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl here in my home studios. Mr. Tyler Keith holding things down back there in the office of West Bloomfield. Just as a reminder, you can catch Tyler and I Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. until noon, Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access. If you're at home, you can go ahead and tune us in. Channel 15 on Comcast. If you have AT&T, that's going to be channel 99. You can also tune us in to your radio dial, 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM, The Bip. We are continuing the conversation regarding the incident that happened yesterday in our nation's capital. I won't even say it's an incident. It was a disgrace to democracy. I never thought when I tuned into the TV that I would see what I was seeing yesterday. And to talk a little bit more is joining us now on the Oakland County Megacast, Dave Boucher. He is the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. Thank you for being with us. Your initial thoughts when you saw what was happening on the nation's capital yesterday?
Yeah, so I think we went into yesterday understanding that there was a chance that some members of Congress could try to object to the results, the electoral results for Michigan. And so my colleague and I were preparing to, observe what we assumed to be a relatively routine congressional debate over allegations of election fraud. We've covered out these allegations for a long time. All of them that we've, faced have been refuted and debunked through lots of evidence. And so we were preparing for that. We were not.
So Dave, if I can interrupt you for a second, just so people know, typically this is it's very common. It happens every 4 years. It typically takes 30 minutes or less. But you even knew that it was probably going to be more, but still didn't anticipate this.
That's exactly right. It's generally procedural. And while Democrats and Republicans in the past have objected, it's not really come down to an actual formal debate. And no objections have really changed anything. This concept of sending competing slates of delegates to Congress is exceptionally rare. And it's not something that really happens all that often. And it was not intended to happen all that often. But to your point, right, we didn't anticipate that there would be a mass riot and mob that would overtake the U.S. Capitol yesterday. I thought it was interesting, the concept of not expecting something like that to happen. The president has said for months, even before the election, that if he didn't win, the election would be rigged. He's perpetuated conspiracy theories about mail-in voting and other forms of fraud or allegations that just aren't true. And he has fired up his base to believe that anything to the contrary is a smear and a lie and a tactic to undermine democracy. And, his supporters, vocal supporters, his family, Rudy Giuliani and others have said the exact same thing. Yesterday, in front of thousands of people, Rudy Giuliani voiced that there should be, quote, trial by combat. I don't think it's a huge surprise when the president's supporter is calling for trial by combat that people would rush the U.S. Capitol. I don't think that's a huge shock. So the concept that yesterday was a peaceful protest, even from the outset, is a little bit disingenuous, I would say. Again, especially because the president has repeatedly fomented conspiracy theories about election fraud.
Dave Boucher with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. He's the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. As you're watching what's going on in D.C., what are you thinking about how it relates to Michigan? Because we've been a key player throughout this entire election.
Yeah, some of my first thoughts were about protests in the state capitol in Michigan and about, a very widely covered alleged plot to kidnap and kill Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and how President Trump at times said that the governor essentially wasn't grateful enough to the FBI for thwarting that attack, and politicized, attempted kidnapping and murder of the governor of Michigan. Obviously, the governor has also taken political swipes at the president. That's not a surprise, but when you see the president tell groups like the Proud Boys, who are, a hate group, to stand back and stand by, and then we see members of the same organization storm the Capitol, you can see parallels between the allegations of threats against elected officials in Michigan as well. It's not a huge A to B to C to get to that. So those were some of my first thoughts. We've also seen a lot of calls, both from the congressional delegation, the Democrats, and the congressional delegation, for impeachment or for evoking the 25th Amendment. And we've seen calls at the state legislative level to condemn state lawmakers who have supported some of these allegations of fraud and some of these attempts to undermine the election. And also state legislators who've supported renewed calls for banning guns in the state capitol.
Dave Boucher with us from the Detroit Free Press. He is one of their government and politics reporters with us today on the Oakland County Megacast. And Dave, you did touch on it briefly there. The discussion that's been had on the state level previously, especially after the previous incidents at the Michigan Capitol regarding the allowance of firearms at the Capitol in the state of Michigan and Lansing. After the events of yesterday at the Capitol in Washington, D.C., has those discussions in Lansing or within Lansing politics, obviously it's going to be reignited on the Democratic side of the aisle, but from Republicans on the other side as well, has that conversation advanced at all to where there could be some decisions coming forward regarding security, particularly with regards to weapons at the Michigan Capitol?
I haven't seen that. It certainly might be happening. All of this is happening very quickly, and I, just like pretty much everybody else, was pretty hyper-focused on what was happening in Washington, D.C. yesterday. But yeah, I have seen some tweets and statements from Democrats at the Michigan level who would like to see that change. There's debate on whether or not that's something that should be led by the State Capitol Commission, the entity that's kind of in charge of the rules and regulations of the state capitol, versus the actual lawmakers who were there. I don't think if Republicans and Democrats agreed that there shouldn't be guns at the Capitol, then that would probably be a rule that would be instituted. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not that happens. I mean, there's a new Speaker of the House, Jason Wentworth, a Republican from Clare. I don't know how he stands on the issue. I know that, just like many Republicans, he's an advocate for gun rights. So we'll see. But no, I haven't seen like a huge bipartisan push in the last 12 hours to change that rule. Obviously, that could change. It's still very early.
Dave Boucher with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. You're listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH in Bloomfield Hills. And Dave, if we can kind of continue this conversation, does this give fuel to the individuals that are pushing for the gun ban at the state capitol? Does this give them fuel to their argument to actually get this passed in 2021?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think it's the fact that some of the men who have been accused of trying to plot to kidnap and kill the governor also brought guns into the state capitol earlier this year. And we have that, documented from federal and local law enforcement, and that didn't prompt a change to the rule. I'm not sure that people storming the Capitol in D.C. will change that. It might. It certainly might. It obviously is adding fuel for the Democrats, who have been pushing for that for a while, but obviously the Republicans control the legislature. They're in the majority party. So, it's certainly, in theory, could help Democrats, kind of put this issue on the fore again, but it's unclear whether or not it's going to make any difference.
So I'm really fascinated with the case involving the governor and this plot against her, because you may not have been around in Detroit a few years ago under the Hutari investigation, in which many of them were kind of let off because the argument was this was First Amendment. They were just spouting, their ideologies and things of that nature. And you wonder if this is going to be the same outcome, or can the feds actually make a case? Did they learn from that case and the political fallout from the case long term? Because people need to understand some of these criminal investigations do play out into the laws that are enacted here within our state.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is innocent until proven guilty in the United States. And so obviously the people who have been accused in this case are going through their the judicial proceedings as is their right. The evidence that the FBI and local law enforcement has presented so far includes video, audio, images, reports of finding a fair amount of explosives, a fair amount of guns. They also apparently have sources who were inside the organization who have provided direct communication, indicating real threats, including but not limited to staking out the governor's private residence and plans to take the governor allegedly to Wisconsin for a sham trial before she was executed. Obviously, we'll see how this plays out, but the evidence that has been presented so far, the FBI would want you to know, and the local law enforcement would want you to know, is a lot, and it's credible.
So Dave Boucher with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. You're a reporter for the Detroit Free Press. Your predictions for 2021 in the state of Michigan and our arena of politics.
Yeah, so that's a fair question. Although it's not an election year, every year is essentially an election year, so we'll see what happens. We found out yesterday that Laura Cox, who is the chairwoman of the Michigan Republican Party, is not going to seek that role again, and so that will be really interesting to see the dynamics. It looks like some of the people who might be in leadership there are, equally as supportive of the president. I think that it's fair to say that there is and this happens every time especially when there's a loss at the presidential level, that there's competing factions within the Republican Party, people who argue that the president was bad for Republican politics and bad for the country, and people who are ardent Trump supporters, like your last caller. And so that's a dynamic that's going to play out in Michigan and at the national level. There'll be a potentially, I don't want to call it a comparable dynamic, but there's also obviously a division in the Democratic Party as well, between so-called moderates and people who are a little bit further to the left. We'll see how that plays out with the Biden administration. I think it is worth noting, now that the Democrats have control of the U.S. Senate, that Michigan's 2 U.S. senators, Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters, are both in line to become committee chairmen and chairwomen. Obviously, when you have members of your state delegation who are the heads of committees, that tends to convey them a little bit more power. So Gary Peters is in line to be the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, and Debbie Stabenow is in line to be the chairwoman of the Agriculture Committee. And so again, those are powerful positions. The U.S. Senate is split 50-50, and so Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. But chair people tend to be able to help dictate what legislation even appears before the committee, and so that's a lot of power for Senators Peter and Stabenow. So it'll be interesting to see what they take up, what they want their priorities to be, and how that actually and whether that leads to any new legislation or ideas.
Michigan has definitely come out as a major power player in the election process, not just this past presidential election, but previous ones as well. But going forward, are we going to gain more power or lose more power coming out of the Trump administration?
I don't know. I think that's there's a lot of different ways to look at it. From a purely representative government position, the state is expected to lose at least one member of the congressional delegation due to the census. Every 10 years, the country conducts the census, and members of Congress are appropriated based on the number of people that live in the state. Michigan has lost a lot of people in the last 10 years, and so it's expected that the delegation could lose a seat in Congress. Right now, there are 16 representatives, 2 senators, and 14 members of Congress, of the House, The state's expected to at least lose one seat. So obviously, just from a purely representative position, there's going to be one less vote in Michigan. It's unclear. I mean, as you know, Michigan's something of a purple state. The president won the state in 2016 by roughly 10,700 votes, but President-elect Biden won the state this time by about 154,000 votes. It's unclear. I mean, there's an argument that the nonpartisan redistricting commission that was established through a voter drive several years back will reapportion not only the congressional districts, but also the state legislative districts in a way that is arguably more reflective of the state. It's worth noting that the state has 2 U.S. senators who are Democrats. The governor's a Democrat, the Secretary of State's a Democrat, the Attorney General's a Democrat, and Republicans overwhelmingly control both the House and the Senate at the state level. There's an argument that there's a disconnect there, and that it's interesting to see whether or not redistricting will change that. It might not. It certainly might not. There are obviously lots of places throughout the state where there's a ton of Republican support. So redistricting is definitely something I'm watching, and we'll see. We'll see how the power of Michigan changes under a Biden administration.
But what about the relationship between the governor and the president-elect? Biden and Whitmer seem to have a pretty good relationship. In fact, some people thought she was in the running for the vice presidency. And what does that relationship mean for the state of Michigan during his presidency?
Yeah, I think everybody, Republican or a Democrat, would want their governor to at least have a working, functional relationship with the federal government. If for no other reason than it could help get federal assets or federal aids or anything else, to help work together. And you're right, the governor, if appears to have a pretty good relationship with President Biden. She was definitely on the short list to be a possible VP candidate. So that could help. I mean, I think right now the number one thing that most residents are looking at when it comes to the relationship between the governor and the federal government is the COVID vaccine and the distribution and rollout of that vaccine. The state has hundreds and thousands of doses, but has run into some challenges with actually getting those doses injected into people's arms. And the governor has said that that's due to, in part, a failure to communicate effectively with the federal government, or the federal government's, more precisely, the federal government's failure to communicate with the states. Other states are also working with the federal government and have a higher percentage of people vaccinated. And so that's definitely a question that will be, that we're going to continue to ask moving forward.
Yeah, Dave Boucher with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. He's the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. And with that, Dave, when you're talking about the COVID vaccine, I will say when it's the finger pointing, I think both sides will say, we're tired of the finger pointing. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People are dying. They're losing their businesses. They're going hungry. And on top of that, we just saw the display on the nation's capital that we saw yesterday that I think no one in our lifetimes would think that we would ever see. And you also wonder about the long-term effects about yesterday and what the message it sends across not just the nation, but the world as well. But again, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Stop the finger pointing. But can these two sides come together in the state of Michigan? Because I will say Governor Whitmer, she's been the first point. Every single press conference that she has held has pointed the finger at the federal government and Trump specifically. I would imagine that's going to end when Biden takes office.
Potentially. I would imagine that if the state still faces issues 3 months from now with getting the vaccine actually administered to people, that maybe that frustration will remain. But I agree that there's obviously less animosity between Governor Whitmer and President Biden. I do think it's worth noting that the governor and the Republican-controlled legislature has worked together on some initiatives, specifically around COVID. They worked together in the late summer and early fall on a pretty big education plan that kind of gave some flexibility to districts on how they wanted to institute COVID measures. And it was, again, it was bipartisan, and they worked together on it. They worked together on criminal justice reform this year. But yeah, there's been a lot of finger pointing from the governor and Republicans in the legislature about some aspects of COVID relief. And yeah, you can argue that both sides have some, can take some of the blame, but finger pointing in politics is I don't want to say it's foundational, but it's certainly common and unfortunately expected. So yeah, on one hand, people are tired of it. And on the other hand, people are going to continue to do it. I think that was indicative of the conversation you had with your previous caller, that people are both frustrated and exceedingly ready to point the finger at themselves. So do I think that partisan rhetoric will die down? No, absolutely not. I mean, we saw last night when Congress came back after hundreds of rioters stormed the Capitol. One person died after being shot. 3 other people died due to medical conditions. 14 people were arrested. We saw there are reports that 2 members of Congress had to be separated because they were going to get in a fist fight related to whether or not electoral votes should be accepted. That was hours after people stormed the Capitol. So no, I don't think any of that's going to change. Frankly, I don't know why it would.
Well, it definitely doesn't do anything to help the divide that is within our country right now. Hey, before we let you go, though, can we talk about COVID relief in the state of Michigan?
Sure.
I know the governor yesterday, her press conference was pretty much overshadowed with the events that took place out of the nation's capital yesterday. Yeah. But one of the things that they were saying is that starting next Monday, it is going to be expanded. The vaccination program is going to be expanded.
Yep.
But also, we have to recognize that it's one of the reasons it's being expanded is because there are a lot of people that it's available to who are saying, not going to do it just yet.
Yeah, we have heard for a variety of reasons that people who are in that top priority list haven't gotten the vaccine yet. We've heard, for example, from hospitals who say they had anticipated vaccinating workers, but they couldn't vaccinate like an entire floor of people at one time because just like any other vaccine, sometimes there are side effects. And if too many people, had to miss a day of work because of side effects, that would actually hurt their ability to serve as a hospital. There have been other frontline workers who have just refused to take the vaccine for whatever reason. It's worth noting that there's been more than 120,000 people who have received the vaccine. The state's quick to note that Michigan is 11th, at least it was yesterday, when it comes to terms of the total number of people who have been administered the first dose of the vaccine. However, looking at the same statistics, the state is 40th when it comes to per capita number of people who have been administered the vaccine. You're right, the state is broadly expanding who can get the vaccine. In addition to firefighters, police officers, correctional officers, they're extending it more broadly to anyone who is 65 and older. I've gotten a dozen calls and emails this morning about how to make that work, how people are supposed to get their appointments. Michigan.gov/COVID vaccine, where the state's telling you to go. There's a big blue box there that says COVID vaccine. You click on it, and there's supposed to be information for individual county health departments about how to sign up. Now, I will caution, the vast majority of health departments do not have information on that site yet. So if you are interested in getting that vaccine, I would tell you to go to that website and see if your information is there, or to call your local health department. As you noted, Ronnie, this doesn't roll out until Monday. You can't start getting this until Monday, but we anticipate many counties are going to start coming more online with an appointment apparatus so that people can start at least getting in line virtually for these vaccines. The governor did note that it's really important for people to actually make these appointments ahead of time. She and the state don't want long lines of people, crowding together and waiting for this vaccine for hours. We've seen that happen in other states. She and others in the state would argue that is actually a great way to catch COVID. So they're telling people to avoid doing that. But yes, this is a huge next step for the state of Michigan in rolling out its vaccinations.
And so we want to also let you know that if you're looking for that link, if you go to civiccentertv.com, click on coronavirus, you'll find the headline, and there is a link to the state of Michigan for you to be able to easily access that information. Dave Boucher with us here on the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. Great to have you with us. And I have to just note out behind you, I see your Detroit map and your Charleston map. Is that Charleston, South Carolina?
No, that's Charleston, West Virginia. I am a proud former resident of Charleston, West Virginia. I covered the state capitol there for several years with the local newspaper. And so I have that. I also used to live in Dallas and have a nice Dallas map as well.
Oh, I didn't see Dallas because it was behind you. So yeah. I went to college at the College of Charleston in South Carolina.
Sure. No, I've visited. It's a delightful city. I definitely think most people, when they think of Charleston, think of South Carolina. But no, I lived in West Virginia, and I'm proud of it.
That's because Charleston, South Carolina is the best place to live. Go Cougars. With that, though, Dave, we want to say thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it, and we appreciate your insight and your knowledge as well.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Oakland County Megacast, and when we come back, we are going to continue this conversation with the superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
COVID-19 has caused many families to fall behind on finances and on groceries, but you're not alone. You shouldn't have to worry about putting food on the table. My Bridges offers access to quality food and income assistance to help families across the state get the food support they need. It's easy to apply and easy to start shopping. Apply for services at michigan.gov/MIBridges. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Michigan, we're calling on you to save lives. Don't ignore it. Don't let it go to voicemail. It's urgent. In fact, it's critical. Because if you've been in close contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19, you may have been exposed to the virus. And you could get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department. So please answer the call to learn how to protect yourself, your family, and friends. We're calling on you to stop the spread of COVID-19. To make it safe to reopen businesses and help Michigan move forward. So if you get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department, you may have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. To protect us all, answer the call. Learn more at michigan.gov/containcovid. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
We want to say thank you for tuning in to the Thursday edition of the Oakland County Megacast. This is not our regular scheduled program, and we want to say extend our apologies to some of our other guests that were previously scheduled to be on our show today, but due to the incident and the events that took place yesterday in our nation's capital, we have realigned our show because it really is history in the making, and I don't think it's in a good way. But our guest that was previously scheduled is Ken Gutman. He is the superintendent of the Walled Lake School District. It's great to have you with us. Not what we wanted to start off our conversation with, but you are an educator, and you saw, along with the rest of the country and the rest of the world, the events that unfolded yesterday in our nation's capital. What is your advice to parents and teachers as to how they relay those images to their students?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Ronnie. It's always good to be here too. And I think that with great sensitivity is how you relay all of this. I talk to my own children, and we talk to our students in school with an open mind and with an understanding that we all have a lot to learn. I think we see that the divisiveness that we've seen over the last year particularly, but as you and I talked about off the air, 2020's not really left us. The divisiveness is still there. And, I still firmly believe that our children are the ones who will need to lead us out of this divisiveness, because we as adults have not had much success with that. So, we need to empower them to make good decisions, to bring people together. We need to heal, and we're not there yet.
I will say, I think the one good thing that is coming out of this, the attention that is being brought on our entire government and the system that is, because I will say prior to this year, I don't ever recall paying attention to our elected leaders and the electoral count. And this year, I was like, I didn't realize they did that. And then the importance of that. So there is a little bit of silver lining in this, and in the whole destruction that has been around it.
I love your positivity.
It does appear we have some connection issues with Ronnie and with Ken Gutman. We will get back to them as soon as we can here on the Oakland County Megacast. I will let them know that we're having some connection issues live and in process as we continue this episode of the Oakland County Megacast. I'm standing by here in the Lakes FM studios. We have lost them. I will try to relaunch our connection to them here in just a moment. My apologies to those of you listening on Civic Center TV and on Lakes FM as well, as we've had some connection issues here in the Lakes FM studios. We'll take a quick break. In fact, we'll come back after a short message from a public service announcement, and then we will try to reconnect with Ronnie and with Ken Gutman and get back going on this edition of the Oakland County Megacast on Civic Center TV, on Lakes FM, on the Biff, and all throughout the local area.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
This may seem uncomfortable, but so is being hooked to an IV, sleeping in a hospital bed, and fighting for your life. When it comes to COVID-19, comfort is not as important as saving lives. Wearing a mask can greatly reduce the chance of spreading the virus. So mask up, Michigan, every time you leave home.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. We do have our connection back and reestablished with both Ronnie and Ken Gutman. Can continue now. Ronnie.
So we do apologize for the technical difficulties, but this is life in the age of 2021 and 2020. We have all learned to navigate the technology ups and downs throughout the COVID-19 crisis. So if we can go ahead and continue our conversation with Ken Gutman, the superintendent of Walled Lake Schools. Ken, we were talking about the conversation that parents and even your teachers are having with their students right now after witnessing what we saw yesterday at the nation's capital. I never thought in my lifetime I would ever see such a display.
Certainly historic, and perhaps not in the way we want to see it, but it's a lesson for all of us. I think you and I were talking about, and I don't know if we were on the air or not on the air. We were talking about the fact that you're more attuned to the electoral process than you've been before. I taught American history as one of the courses I taught in the West Bloomfield schools, and would be a great year to teach history of government, to solely focus on that process too. I mean, I think we've learned a lot more. People have been more attuned to that, just the way our government works and what is legal and what's not legal. And so from that perspective, in a positive way, there's a lot to learn.
And take aside what actually happened, I know that I didn't know really until yesterday. The process typically takes about 30 minutes. It's just a procedure that they go through. But then to see the aides that bring in the locked boxes, what history is behind those boxes, but how they protected them. Like, the Capitol is under siege. They're being barricaded in, and these low-level aides are taking these boxes with the electoral votes inside and rushing them to security and to safety. I didn't even know there was such a process.
No, nor did I. And again, I taught American history. So there's so much more we can all learn from this.
But that is the beautiful thing, in that we can open the conversation, we open up the dialogue. But how do parents start the dialogue in a balanced arena for their kids who were maybe watching this unplay live on TV? And we do want to sadly admit that there was an individual, one of the Trump supporters, she was shot and killed by Capitol Police, and that did happen on live TV. And while they have tried to edit out those images, you heard the gunshot, you saw the video of her being pulled out on a stretcher. And if you were a child, because they're not in the classroom right now, so if they were sitting at home and maybe they saw this, those can be disturbing images to try to have to explain to your kid.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can be completely unbiased when we talk to our own children. I'm not sure we are completely unbiased. I think we share with them our thinking. I think we also need to make sure that we do a lot more listening than talking and help them understand, make sense of what's happening. It's hard to help them make sense of events as they unfold live, because we may not be able to make sense of them too. So a lot of listening is probably the way to go, at least to start, to understand how our children are feeling.
I'm thinking about you and your team members and the up and down roller coaster you have been on this ride, the coronavirus ride, since this past March. You think things are starting, you're getting a handle. We have a vaccine, because they did announce yesterday, the governor did announce that they're going to start providing the vaccine to teachers. But that message got lost in the chaos that was coming out of the Capitol. But is there an end to this road that you're trying to focus on?
Well, we're hoping there is. We certainly would be okay getting off the roller coaster and getting everyone back to school and happy and healthy. This has been a crazy ride, and my heart breaks for our students, our parents, our community who are going through this, our staff members who are doing everything they can to do the very best they can to teach under difficult circumstances. I don't know. I don't know when we come to the end of that road. And I think it's going to still be a little while. I'm not sure everyone's getting the vaccine. We still haven't received word from the health department, and yet we understand there was a link. We found out there was a link last night where some of our staff were supposed to be able to access an ability to get appointments for the vaccine. We still don't have direct information from the health department on that. So those slots have already filled up. It's just, there's a lot that needs to happen before we'll have a complete return of all children to school. And my guess is that's probably in the fall, ideally.
I will say the governor's office is lucky I'm not on their PR team, because these are like PR basics 101. You put this up, like you're going to stand, you're doing a press conference. You need to understand that A, B, C, D, E, and F needs to be addressed before you throw this stuff out there.
That's right.
So are you learning about this for the first time watching the governor's press conference?
We had a sense that, we had a sense a couple days earlier that vaccines would be made available, but we didn't receive the link from the health department, period. The health department sent it to someone else who forwarded it to us prior to 11 o'clock last night. And even knowing the day before that this link was coming, we could have let our staff know. The 28 Oakland County superintendents could have worked out a plan to make sure that the distribution was equitable and that one district wasn't overrepresented. I have a very large school district here, and our staff members may or may not be able to get slots to get vaccines when other districts may have most of their teachers vaccinated. So some coordination and some planning would have been appreciated.
Well, what makes it hard, though, is because this is put out to the general public, they don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So they see the press conference, they see the headline, and they're thinking immediately, all the teachers are getting vaccinated and they can put their kids back in the classroom tomorrow.
Right.
And that's not the case.
Correct.
And how do you expand that knowledge for them to understand? Because frustrations are already pretty high during this time as well.
They are. I shared a little frustration with our staff this morning, my disappointment in the way this was rolled out. And, we're going to, I'm meeting with the health department with a number of superintendents this afternoon, and we'll share our displeasure there as well. We want to work as partners to take care of our staff and our students and our community. We just would love to have an equal partnership.
Ken Gutman with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. He's the superintendent of Walled Lake Schools. Ken, you've always been very open and very transparent with us as well. And I think along with that, to the members of your staff and all of the parents and your students as well. And I think that's been the great thing about you and your leadership throughout this crisis. But as we continue on, I know that back in December, the governor did announce that high schools were going to be allowed to reopen. What is the status of all of your classrooms? Where do things stay? Is remote really the best way to go right now?
I think remote is a personal decision right now. Obviously, there are so many advantages to in-person learning. I visited an elementary school this morning, and when we conclude, I'm heading to another one. And what I saw, our elementary schools are back in session. They have been since December. And I will tell you that what I saw was fantastic. It's not school as it was last year. It's not school most likely as it will be next year. But it was fantastic to see students excited and staff members excited to teach and learn. Our secondary, and we also still have two other virtual options for elementary students whose parents feel that that's a better option for them. An individual one and a group one, so both virtual. At the secondary level, our Board of Education meets tonight to consider whether we return secondary schools on January 20th. And we fully, I look forward to that conversation this evening. Do I think in-person learning is better than virtual learning? I do. But I also think, again, it's an individual decision. If you don't feel comfortable with that as a student or as a parent, you don't send your student in for that. I get that sentiment as well. So we'll see how the conversation goes this evening.
So there have been reports out about thousands of students that haven't returned to their districts. Do you worry about that? Is your enrollment down? Or do you think virtual is giving you a new platform to go forward in 2021 and years beyond to keep kids enrolled and to balance those different learning styles?
I don't think those are mutually exclusive thoughts. I think that I am concerned. Our enrollment's down, as is the enrollment of most public schools in the state of Michigan. And the number of students have chosen to either stay home, or we've had kindergarten students who were supposed to be in kindergarten this year. Their parents chose to keep them home an extra year. But at the same time, I do think that virtual learning could be a part of our future. So whether it's whether it's a whole schedule or a partial schedule, sure, that's something our instructional team is looking at. How can we continue to offer that option to students in the future?
And really, it's a conversation about, because I know unions can be a big hurdle when trying to talk about some of these changes, because people like to say, this is the way we've always done it. And one thing COVID-19 has taught us, we can't live on how we used to do things. We've all had to change and pivot. So maybe this is the conversation that needs to be had going forward to open up these other avenues to schools or to students that maybe don't thrive in the traditional school classroom environment.
I agree with that, Ronnie. I think our association's been great with us in terms of planning and talking about virtual opportunities. So I don't have a concern about our association being a roadblock in this case. It's just, it is overcoming that's what we've always done and looking at a new future. And if you had told us last February, in a month, you're going to be 100% virtual, we would have laughed, right? I mean, that's just what. So in some respects, this has really forced us to do some creative thinking and planning for the future.
And with that, though, I also wonder, what does this mean for the future of education? If I'm a college student and I'm studying education right now, what does this mean for the future? Is this going to be a part of how I need to learn to teach?
I think our schools of education will probably need to spend considerable time on this. As the father of two sons who are education majors in college, they know this is most likely going to be a part of their future, and that teaching virtually, which requires an entirely different set of skills, may very well be a part of their career.
Right, like you're going to have to learn TikTok.
Well, I'm not going to learn TikTok, but I agree with you. I think, yeah, well, maybe.
Hey, look, I struggle with TikTok, I will tell you. I go on and I go down the rabbit hole, but I've never posted because I just can't get it. I'm still struggling with Snapchat.
Yeah, I can do Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook. I'm good there, but TikTok, I'm not so sure.
Well, Ken, it's always great to have you with us here on the Megacast. We apologize for the little bit of the technology snafu that we are having, but I think so many people are experiencing that right now. But quickly, before I let you go, anything that maybe I didn't ask you that you want to mention before we let you go?
There's so many things I'd love to talk about, but let me say this. January is School Board Appreciation Month. Whether you're in the Walled Lake schools or any of the other districts who are represented here on the Megacast, thank a board member. They are volunteers, they are unpaid, and this is a very difficult time to be a school board member. When you look at what's happening across the country, they are not loved, and they volunteered for this job. They're doing it in the best interest of the community and of the schools. So I would end with that, Ronnie. Let's thank our school board members for everything they're doing for our kids.
And you bring up a great point, because so many of them, like you said, it's a volunteer situation. They're not getting paid, and the amount of time and effort and love and passion that they put into it is really needs to be supported, whether or not you agree with their decisions or not. So absolutely. Great point to leave on.
You bet.
Well, we thank you so much for your time. Ken Gutman with us. He's the superintendent of Walled Lake Schools. Again, thank you for your time. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast.
Thank you.
Perry tested positive for COVID-19. Emma was exposed to a friend who's positive. Willa's waiting on test results. After any contact with COVID-19, or if you test positive, stay home for at least 10 days. If you live with others, keep your distance and wear a mask. Help Michigan contain COVID-19. Visit michigan.gov/contain-COVID. Perry.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in to the Thursday edition of the Oakland County Megacast. It has been a day like no other after all that we did witness together yesterday on January 6th as our nation's capital was seized, was under siege by so many of the protesters with the Trump supporters. It was a day like no other, but we hope to leave you with a little bit of a happy story here on the Thursday edition of the Megacast. Jan Borowitz joins us now on the Oakland County Megacast. She was actually lucky enough to be chosen to help decorate the White House for the Christmas season. Jan, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to share.
I was telling everyone, I was like, well, you're the only one amongst all of us that actually stepped foot in the White House. What was that like for you?
It was pretty amazing. It was, I can still, when I relive a couple of those particular moments, still get chills and have to pinch myself. When I think the biggest moment was when I walked through the front doors into the grand foyer. I opened the door by myself and walked in alone, and I was standing in the front foyer of the White House. Yeah, it was tingling.
Because give us a little bit of your background, Jen. Where you're from, what, the Grosse Pointes? Are you a decorator?
St. Clair Shores.
St. Clair Shores. Okay, so
Yep.
St. Clair Shores.
Moved here about 10 years ago from West Michigan, and originally from Southeast Michigan in the Lambertville area.
How did this even come about?
You know, it goes back to when I was a little girl laying on my living room floor and my mom had lots of books. She was a reader, and she had one on the White House and the First Ladies. And I read through that over and over. And then several years ago, watching HGTV, I learned that, the volunteers decorate the White House? Maybe I can do that. Maybe I will do that someday.
And so it was years in the making, not something that happened like overnight.
Correct. Yeah, it's always been in the back of my mind. I've had a couple of other interviews where it was reported that my family and my job got in the way and I could finally do it this year. That's not really correct. My family and my job were priorities. And at that point, it was just something that maybe in the future, and then it presented itself. And I thought, this is the year I'm going to go for it. Just like COVID.
It's been quite the year, hasn't it? And we'll kind of get to that a little bit later. But I just want to, so what was the process? How did you even apply? How did your name get tossed into the hat to even be able to do this?
Yeah, thank goodness for the internet, because I just went on and I Googled, how do you apply? How do you get to be a volunteer? And so simply you just go to whitehouse.org, and there's a live link. And in the last few years, that's usually in August, and you answer some questions and you submit a short summary of why you want to do this. And then you wait until October 15th, I think it was, they notified us if we were selected. And then they notify you about a month later of all of the details. But that's the simple process. I did a lot of research. I wrote some additional letters, but that's what you do. They just want you to apply online, and whatever else you do is on your own.
So what was your response to why did you want to do it?
I'm fascinated by history. That's always been a favorite subject of mine, and especially American history. Fascinated by the White House. I ever the White House. The last was won by the chief usher during the Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower era. I find it all fascinating. I've been to Washington and just am in awe of the monuments and the history there.
So with you mentioning that, I have to ask. I'm sorry, I have to ask you, watching what happened to our nation's capital yesterday, as someone who is passionate and in love with our history, what were your thoughts watching what happened and what unfolded yesterday in our nation's capital?
It's just a sad situation, all around. There's a lot of anger and hate, and it's just sad.
But with that, can I ask you, do you have an interior decorating background at all?
I don't. I wanted to say the other thing, when I love to decorate and make things pretty. I just kind of a motto of mine. Let's just make it pretty. and one the questions on the application at whitehouse.org there are just a few. Are you a military, active military? No. Are you retired military? No. Are you from a Gold Star family? No. Are you a professional florist? No. Are you a professional designer? No. And my thought was, this is going really well. So then I wrote in the short summary. There's so many characters you can use that. I like to make things pretty. I love history. I'm enamored by the White House and the people that have been in it and the things that have the history there, all of it.
So Jan, knowing the questions, were you surprised that you got the call?
I submitted everything, and I sent some other letters. I'm the oldest of 8 siblings, so they also got together and sent a corporate application for me, and we're my cheerleaders. I have a granddaughter who submitted a recommendation for me. And I wrote some letters to other people, the chief usher, the chief florist, things like that, and just it was a short letter with some one page of several pictures that I had done, mantles that I put together every month in my house, costumes I make for my grandchildren, things I've done in my garden, things like that, and there are typically around 8,000 applicants, and generally in the last few years they've chosen around between 100 and 150 volunteers for the week. And this year, because of COVID and trying to social distance, there were 80 selected. And I asked the question of the assistant social secretary, Emily, when I got there. There was a Q&A period. And she said, despite COVID, we still had about 8,000 applicants.
Wow. To think that you were picked out of 8,000 applicants. Yeah. What an honor. Walk us through the process. So you arrive. What happens then? Do they pick your designs, or do they give you a picture and say, this is what we want it to look like, here your supplies, go to work?
Yeah, the whole planning starts back in August with a small team of, there's a head designer, and he's out of Chicago. And then there are team leads. This year they named the teams after the reindeers. So I was on Team Donner, and each team has a lead. Those leads have also been, for the most part, my understanding, have been volunteers in the past and been selected, and there's a stipend for them. And then, of course, the main director is paid. The rest of us are all volunteers, and They come up with the First Lady on the design. And then there's a team of people who come in, other volunteers that come in the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And they go to the warehouse pretty much, and they pull out lots of things are reused year after year, repurposed, recycled. And so they have an inventory. Nick is the lead designer, and over the course of the last 3 years prior to this, he's really done from what I understand, a really great job of inventorying all of that and knowing what's there and reusing it wisely, so that new purchases can be minimized.
I love that. When you think about the federal government, you're not thinking about them reusing some of their holiday decorations, which we all do each and every year. What's the biggest thing you took away from this experience?
I think just savoring the moments of an adventure. In some of the other interviews I did, they talked about dreams, and I don't know that this was ever really a dream. It was, I don't have these dreams, or I don't have a bucket list. I have what I call in my head adventure intentions, because I think in adventure you enter into it and you enjoy it and you savor it and you share it. I don't want a list that I just check off that I did something and move on. And so I just savored every moment. I drank everything in and looked around and watched and listened. I talked to the openness of people in the White House. Secret Service will just chat with you. The electricians, the food service, the wait service, they're all very friendly and will just chat up. They like to tell you how long they've been there and talk about their experiences also. So, and then you're in Washington. So when we left that White House, I was out and about on sidewalks every evening.
It is, I've had the opportunity as well I have to go to DC for work. And when you do that nighttime walk or that nighttime run and you're looking at these monuments, there's an awe that comes over you.
The best, yeah. Yeah. And I arrived on Thanksgiving afternoon, well, late morning. And so I just decided, I unpacked and I got my walking shoes on and walked over to Arlington Cemetery. It's about a 3-mile walk from my hotel. And as I stood there and then I looked back into Washington, D.C. from the cemetery, I thought, what a great place to be on Thanksgiving.
Oh, even though you weren't with your family.
Yes.
With that, did you get the opportunity to meet the First Lady or the President at all?
I saw the President with his grandchildren get off the helicopter when they came back from Camp David from their Thanksgiving break. It landed on the White House lawn and they walked in. We watched them from the Blue Room windows. And the stateroom and the Blue Room looked over onto that area. And so we watched him get out. And the First Lady comes down, historically, typically comes down on Monday. Monday they have, the decorating took place on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On Monday, they have, the First Lady has a luncheon for all the volunteers throughout the whole year. People who volunteer at their mail centers and at the Easter egg hunt and all of the different opportunities for volunteers. Those volunteers are invited on Monday for the first walkthrough of the Christmas holiday decorations, and then there's a luncheon. And she comes down into the grand foyer and waves and gives a little welcoming and a thank you, and then goes back upstairs to the residence. That's the way the First Ladies, as I have researched over the past several years, have done it.
She comes across as so elegant. But I also wonder, what was this like for you to do this but you're also doing it in the middle of a pandemic.
You know, they all through the communication with the White House prior to going, they highlighted the things they were doing for distancing, social distancing, wearing masks. When we arrived on Friday morning, there was a central meeting area, and everyone was tested before we left the hotel. And there were people that, at least one that morning that I am aware of, and then at least one in the group that came in on the Monday through Wednesday that were sent home because the test came back not good.
Oh.
They gave us, along with our aprons, which is a treasured keepsake. Everyone got an apron. We all got masks. I didn't think it fit very well, but I brought my own. I brought several Christmassy masks from a local sewer, and I wore those. All of the food in the previous years, the food was served kind of a buffet style. This year, it was served in carry-out containers. And they ate in groups instead of one big mealtime together. They had 3 different times for grouping and tables set apart. And so the one time that it was a little bit crowded, I would say, even in that Monday luncheon, it was still distanced, the way the food was set up. But when everyone was waiting for the First Lady to come down, there's only so much room. So I tried just not to breathe as much.
But Jan, I'm so excited that you were able.
Then when I got home, I just kept, we have our grandchildren and my son and daughter-in-law are staying here while their house is finished. And so I just stayed in my bedroom most of the time with a mask. And when I came out, I wore my mask and a shield for 7 days, and everything was fine.
Well, Jan, I will say I'm so excited that you were able to have this opportunity. Jan Borowitz with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. She was one of the select few across the nation to be picked to help decorate the White House for this past Christmas. Thank you so much for being with us on the Oakland County Megacast.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's great to have you with us. And also history, you got to experience history and go into the doors and into the foyer and the inner sanction of the White House. And of course, yesterday, after following yesterday's developments on the Capitol, I think we are all taking that in with a lot more appreciation. Mm-hmm. So we want to say thank you to Jan, but also thank you to Tyler, Jake, and Larry for everything today and able to get us on the broadcast today. This has been the Oakland County Megacast.